morning, everyone. I'm Peifeng Liu, and I am an ALCS student. I am planning to study computer science after I finish the program. So the reason I love computer science is because it provides an efficient way to people to help them to do things efficiently. And it can be used in many different areas. For example, in finance area recently, there is a technology-based innovation called Bitcoin has been grown in popularity. Who here has heard of Bitcoin or even have one? All right, I can see a lot of you have heard of this technology and even have one of these. So some of you might be confused about what Bitcoin is and how it connected to our life. So let me make an examples. For myself, as an international student, I sometimes need to pay the tuition for ALCI for a semester. But I don't usually carry that much of cash in my pocket, so I have to transfer money from China to America. And the ALCI tuition fee for each semester is about $5,600.
That's a really good value.
That's a
Really good value.
Yes, that's expensive, but it's worth it. It's worth it. But, however, when I transfer money, I found out that I actually paid more than $5,600 in the process. Why? Because according to Turney and Lee, the banks usually charge 2% to 3% international transaction fee in the process. So it actually cost me around $5,700 to $5,800, depends on your bank. For me, I spent $5,700 in the process. So it's about $100 extra in the process. That is really expensive. And think about it, how can you use this extra $100 for? We can use it to do many things. As I can imagine, I can use this $100 first to buy 32 double burgers, animal styles, and also 30 medium coffee latte in Starbucks. So we all want this extra $100 in our pocket, and it feels good to have this much of money. But a question raised up, why it costs so much? Why the transaction fee costs about 2 to 3%? The reason is because of the bank's centralized database. So because bank use centralized database, which is a database that held by one authority or a third-party storage center, so they don't share information with each other. So when the banks in China transfer money to the US, they need to go through several banks, and these several banks in the between take service fee. This is why it costs so much. So after I discovered this problem, Bitcoin jumped in my eyes. And Bitcoin, which is a digital currency that allows me to save cost because it does not cost the international transaction fee, and it does not have minimum or maximum transaction limitations, which is mean that I can transfer money from any time and in any amount. So there's several digital currencies like Bitcoin in the world. They are Ripple and Ethereum. So this Bitcoin, after I read several research papers, I found out that all of these digital currency use one technology platform, and that platform is blockchain. And that blockchain is why it makes Bitcoin can transfer money with no limitations and free cost. So what is this blockchain? Let me explain it to you. So blockchain is a distributed ledger compared to the centralized database that bank uses. A distributed ledgers, according to the graph here, you can see that in the centralized database, the banks is the center, and it holds all the informations. But in the distributed ledgers, such as blockchain, every user shares informations, and every users do not have to get permissions to access any data in the network, and it is also open to the public. So that's why when you transfer money in the Bitcoin, you don't have to cost so much, because you don't have to go through several banks in between. Everybody can just directly transfer to each other. So as I talk about those advantages of blockchain, today I want to argue that blockchain is a better system to people to help them to better manage, organize, and store their data. And it is better than the centralized database because of blockchain's transparency, immutability, and also its decentralization. So first, let me talk about blockchain's transparency and how it helps people to better manage, organize, or store their data. So first, what is blockchain's transparency? The transparency of blockchains, according to LISC, it reveals the public address of an asset owner, and it also reveals the past transactions of a user, which is mean that everybody in the network can see the past transactions that other people did before, and they also can find the users of that transactions. So this transparency can increase the efficiency in the finance. According to Guo and Liang, in the bank credit information system, it has a prominent problem that the system is lack of information and it limits the business expansion of the banks. It's also difficult to control loans quality in the process. So blockchain's transparency can help this credit information system to be better because it reveals what these transactions was made, and it helps the investor to know what the transactions for, and it helps them to make better decisions when they make the investments. Next, let's jump to the blockchain's immutability and how it helps people to better manage, organize, and store their data. So blockchain's immutability, simply to say, the immutability is that blockchain is unalterable, which is mean that it's hard to rewrite the history of the blockchain. And this is really important for blockchain because the blockchain is built by a decentralized database, which there is no central authority that hold the data. In the past, the centralized database usually have one authority because it needs to build up credibility, and because blockchain does not have one authority, it needs to use the immutability to make sure all the transaction is viewable and people can trust the chain. So the immutability of blockchain can ensure the credibility of the blockchain. And by achieving that, it uses hash algorithm, which is a cryptography, and it is hard to hack due to the complex calculations, and it is also easy to verify. So what is this hash? So hash is an algorithm, which is a mathematical function, and according to Zambrano, hash is a set of mathematical functions which are designed to output a digital data output a digital signature of any digital data, which is mean that, for example, in real life, if a person want to make a transactions, they have to sign their own signatures. But in the digital world, because the digital data is easy to be changed, so the hash algorithm is to ensure that digital signature is secure and the transactions information is validated. So let's look at how this hash works in the transactions. As we can see in this photo, the hash can transfer a planned task into a hash task, which is the task that only the person who used the transactions can know about the content. And as I already talked about how hash worked in blockchain, let me talk about how it works in blockchain's transactions. So when the person is transfer money from one person to another one, first, let's make an example. If Professor Champlin want to transfer money to me,
I'm Mike now?
it's another one. Don't worry about it. So if Professor Champlin want to transfer money to buy my coffee, the transaction will be packaged with other transactions in one block, and this block will generate a hash code, which is shown down below. And if 10 minutes later he decided no want this coffee but handy special, he would then ask me to transfer money back. And then these blocks will generate another hash code, which has two hash codes. That one is based on the previous one, and another one is a new one, and so on. So how this hash code works in the transactions? The importance of this hash code is that if a hacker want to hack one of the block and take those Professor Chamberlain's money away, he cannot do it because in blockchain's network, every transaction is viewable. So if he changed one of them, the hash code will be changed. And if the next transaction's hash code did not match the previous one, every users in the blockchain will find out the problem. So if the hacker want to hide the trace that he made to that block, he will have to hack all of the previous blocks, which is really difficult to make. And now let's move on the blockchain's decentralizations and how it's better than a centralized database. So the decentralization of the blockchains helps to remove the middleman, which is bank. Let me make another example in real life. For example, if Andrew wants to transfer money to me to buy my computer, but he did not trust me, so he will then put his money first in ASCII as a middleman. So how it works is that he is afraid that I took the money and then I run away with the money on my computer, so he will never get my computer and his money back. So he have to find a middleman to ensure that I will not take the money away. And ASCII, in the process, she will take the transaction fee as a service. Well, why? Because there's no free food in the world, and she will have to take the money, and then I will give the computer to ASCII. So after ASCII get the money and the computer, she will get the money to me and the computer to Andrew, and it ensures that the transaction is success. And according to Kelly, the middleman, the trust third party or middleman, performed an essential function by verifying the legitimacy of financial transactions and transferring the value. So blockchain's decentralizations, the importance of that is to remove the middleman such as ASCII or the bank. So the blockchain's decentralizations, which in the blockchain's network, it establishes trust without middlemen. So right now, Andrew do not have to give his money to ASCII. He can directly give money to me, and we are no longer need to pay money for ASCII because she is all of these transactions. So it is a win-win situation. And how to make these decentralizations? The blockchain's way is to give every user a digital record of ledgers. So for example, when Andrew transfers money to me in the blockchain will generate a digital record, and he can use this record to show that I have to give him my computer in order to get my money back. And thus, the result is the decentralization save cost because there's no extra transaction fee caused by the middleman. However, as I talk about so many advantages of blockchains, there is an argument raised up that the conflict of the transparency and the privacy in the blockchain will threaten the system. So first, let me talk about the privacy concerns for the individuals. For example, if I transfer money to my parents for a cup of water or a restaurant payment, they will immediately know two things about me. First, they will know about my finance situations, how much money I earn, and second, they will know every transactions I made in the past. So they will know they will know what games I bought, what clothes I bought, and what food I ate in the last month or even yesterday. And this will leak my privacy to my parents, which is not good because they will know all of my dark secrets. And it is also inconvenience for companies. Imagine if a company used blockchain to transfer money, to another company. According to Malinov, all of their contracting parties, sales, customers, account amounts, and every other little petty detail will become public. So if a company used blockchain to transfer, their finance situation, their future plan will be reviewed because of the transparency of the blockchain. However, blockchain do have ways to prevent this situation from happening. The way the blockchain do it is by cryptography, which is simply to say is an encryption that can encrypt the transaction information in the blockchain. So by doing that, every user will get two keys in the system. First is the public key. The public key refers to the public address in the real life, such as your email address or your Instagram name. And the second one is private key. The private key is similar to password in the real life, similar to your email password, your Instagram password. So let's look at an example when a person is transferring money to another person. Let's see the graph here. If a sender wants to send money to a receiver, he first will use his public key, which is such as his email address, to combine his own private key, refers to password, to encrypt this information of the transactions. And the transaction information will become a cold text, which no one will know the contents about. And then, if the receiver wants to see the content, he will use the sender's public address and combine it with his own private key to decrypt the information. So only the receiver can see the personal information, such as the name and the amount the transferred. And another way that blockchains provide to protect users' privacy is by anonymity. So what is anonymity? According to Sharma, to simply explain this in simple words, I can say that the blockchain info in its system keeps on changing the address for a given wallet. This discourages the ability to trace payment down to a particular wallet. To simply say this is that the blockchain's anonymity provides that every user can trace the past transactions in the blockchains, but also it can hide users' identity, such as their personal name, their home address, or even their email address. So in the blockchains, every user will generate a wallet, which is a bunch of code that no one can get his personal information about. And a user can have multiple wallets so that he can use specific wallet for specific reasons, so he will not afraid that his privacy will be leaked out to others. As I talked, these three advantages of blockchains and how they better to help people to better organize, store, and manage their data, and it is better than the centralized systems. And the blockchain is better than the centralized system because it's transparency, immutability, and decentralization. Finally, I want to say that the bank should adopt blockchain as a way to store data and share data with other banks. And I think it can help us to make a lower transaction fee, which can benefit all of students in here, because we all have to transfer money from our home country to here, and we don't want to cost extra $100 for this. So I think blockchain is a future wave of finance, and I will take questions now. Thank you, everyone. Yep.
Hi, Peter. This is a very enlightening presentation. I've heard of blockchain, but I didn't know the depth of anything about it until after your presentation. But here's my question to you.
Yeah.
So one of your primary arguments is that the middleman is eliminated and it's decentralized, correct?
Yes.
So what do you say to those individuals who argue that rogue states or individuals like, North Korea, or, Venezuela, or bad people can send, could use money to launder for bad, criminal activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no middleman, there's no authority, there's no monitoring of it, right? So how do you respond to that?
So let me make a clarification of your questions. Do you mean that people can use blockchains to do things without an monetization, right?
Okay, so here's an example. So there's sanctions against North Korea, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in other words, countries around the world are not allowed to, for example, send money to North Korea because there are sanctions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the North Korean governments can circumvent those sanctions by using bitcoins or other types of digital currencies because there is no centralization. So what do you say about that?
That's a good question, but
Thank you.
however, you can use cash to achieve this, right? You can also use cash to achieve this.
Mm-hmm.
So with or without blockchain, you can still do this. But I want to say that in the blockchain, there is there is such regulations.
Okay.
It is called consensus protocol. So consensus protocol in the blockchain system is a set of rules that made before every transactions happened in the blockchain.
Right.
Yeah. So the rule is made by every users in the network. So if someone violate the rule, he will be kicked out of the systems. And thus, the consensus protocol is kind of a regulation in the blockchains. And also, we can, by simply refuse the North Korea users to attending the blockchain. However, although the way is difficult, but it is still possible to do that. And yeah, I just answered 2 questions.
Thank you, Peter.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, a lot of this information was knowledgeable for me. I have a question. So, if I do want to, go and kind of skip the middleman, the bank, and not pay the extra fee, I think that was your main argument. Then, if I do this blockchain, the Bitcoin, there must be an organization or someone who's, taking care, making these chains. The blockchain, there's someone who's programming it, right? So, where do they get their funds? It's just free?
That's so blockchain is a system. So in reality, people who use digital currency actually face this problem because, for example, in the Bitcoin, when the user wants to kind of take care of the system, because it's decentralized, so every user will generate their computing power to take care of the system, which just means that in the past there is only one authority who take care of the system, but right now it's all the users in the network who take care of the system. So the system is functionally fine, and the fund is from when every user transfer their money, they still have to pay for a lower transaction fee, but it's way more lower than the international transactions and the general transactions fee from the banks. And that's how every user gets their fund for. And also in the Bitcoin, because it's a currency, right? So where this currency come from is from mining. So mining is that every user will use their computing power to do a complex calculations to get money. And in this process, their computing power is take caring of the system. And the reward is they would get, for example, 0.1 Bitcoin or so. So it has a reward, and so the system works like that. So by taking care of the system, you can get a reward. So that's why people will voluntarily to take care of the system. Because if they take care of it, they will get a Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin has value.
So do you predict that the trend that will happen in the future, that banks will start to close down because of this, or do you think?
Uh,
They're going to be parallel?
no, because my last thought is that banks should adopt blockchain as a way to share data, because the decentralized database have a lot of advantage, but it also has some downside. So if banks can tweak the blockchain's format, like open networks to the users, it can make bank more efficient. So my argument is not banks will be extinct because of blockchain.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for. All right, we have two. You want one?
No, I'm good.
All right, we'll let Amy
Yeah.
jump in, and then Kevin, and then that'll be it.
Sorry for asking you a question. For me, my major is business. So if I am an investor who wanna invest my money to buy your system, and how much will you sell it to me?
That's a really interesting question because you can't really buy a system like that. As I say, the blockchain does not held by one authority, so you cannot own the system, but you can be part of these systems. So for your questions, my answer is you cannot use your money to buy the system. Sorry.
Okay, last one. That's Chen.
Okay, have you ever heard of the phrase, the bank is not your friend?
Yeah.
So, given that the bank is not your friend, you know what that means, right? The
Mhm.
whole idea the bank wants to make money,
Yeah.
and they have this 2 to 3% transaction fee that they want to give you. So, would you say that if they were to adopt blockchain, that and try to lower their transaction, you're wanting them to lower their transaction fees, but what do you think that, do you think that there needs to be some more convincing for them to be able to do that, or?
The reason why the transaction fee is so high is because the banks, two different banks, does not share the information, so they have to go through a middle bank, to transfer the information. That's why it has the cost. So if you want to lower the cost, you have to talk with the middle bank, and the middle bank might not want to lower the transaction fee because transfer data cost money. That's why it has the transaction fee, right? So, but I'm kind of missing your questions.
What
Can you
about
say
the fact that the banks are selfish?
selfish?
Even if you were to, I guess you're trying to lower the cost, but how can you convince them to lower their transaction fee? It's
Just use the blockchain.
All right, thank you.